this week. Neighbours. Everybody needs good neighbours.
Just a friendly wave each morning helps to make a better day. Neighbours need to get to know.
But does Labour lack a little understanding? Top scientist and Labour peer Robert Winston explains why he believes anti-Semitism is now endemic in his party.
Anti-Semitism is a cause of shame, and it could hit the Labour Party for 6.
Claire Cohen from The Telegraph gives us her perfect blend for the political week.
Jeremy Corbyn got himself in a mangle this week, but at least we've got good friends backing us over Russia.
Oops, does anyone have sticky tape? And after some rough bowling by Australia, comedian Tiff Stevenson puts playing by the rules in the spotlight.
What? I like sandpapering.
This week,
it's where old has-beens become good friends.
Evening all, welcome to This Week. I arrived in France last Friday afternoon just as the terrorist attack in the small southwestern town of Trèbes was unfolding. It was over by bedtime. 3 folks murdered, the Islamist terrorist killed, the policeman who had swapped himself for a hostage in hospital. We all awoke on Saturday morning to the heartbreaking news that gendarme Arnaud Beltrame had died of his wounds, shot and stabbed by the terrorist, throat slit. Now, I know in today's news cycle, Saturday is an age away and much has happened since, but I don't apologise for returning to it tonight, because if this man's remarkable courage and self-sacrifice are not worth marking only a few days after his death, then nothing is. His mother said, "I knew he was the one who'd volunteered before any name was released. It's just the sort of thing he would do." The word hero is bandied about so loosely these days that it's become almost meaningless. Arnaud Beltrame was a hero in every sense of the word, and he's restored its meaning. His example is a rare shaft of light in these dark, depressing days. An evil demon we thought had been slain. Anti-Semitism pollutes society on both sides of the channel once more. I was told today that polls and focus groups show many Brits, not just the young, don't know what anti-Semitism is. Well, gather round. Mireille Knoll was 85, in a wheelchair, suffering from Parkinson's. She'd survived the Holocaust, but not an attack last Friday in her Paris council flat. Stabbed 11 times and burnt to death because she was Jewish. That, dear viewer, is anti-Semitism at its deadliest and most depraved, which is how it always ends up, and which is why it can't be tolerated. Those still in doubt need to educate themselves fast. Speaking of those for whom education has been something of a lost cause, I'm joined on the sofa tonight by 2 pundits. They're ideally suited to the wasteland that is late-night Thursday TV. I speak, of course, of Michael #Choo Portillo and Liz #4%Kendall. Welcome to you both. Michael, your moment of the week.
Michael Gove made a bold initiative on the recycling of plastic, which won the plaudits of environmentalists.
And the public, I see in the polls.
Which is quite something for a Conservative minister. This is the same Michael Gove who made, I think, very useful reforms in education when he was the minister with responsibility. He was sacked by David Cameron. This is the same Michael Gove who, when he was Justice Secretary, showed a real concern for reform of our prisons. He was sacked by Theresa May. He is a minister who, well, really single-handedly in this government shows some gumption, some initiative, some wish to do something, some leadership. And one just, it boggles the imagination to think what it might be like if this man led the government.
He's also your biographer, isn't he?
Yeah.
Just thought I'd point that out. Liz, your moment.
Leadership from 100 MPs who signed a commitment to finding a cross-party solution for funding the NHS and social care. It didn't get much coverage at the beginning of the week, but I think it's extremely significant because we know that any party that puts forward a significant proposal for funding social care risks getting obliterated by their opponents, but the people who really suffer are older and disabled people. The Prime Minister has talked about putting more money into the NHS. That would be welcome, but you can't solve the crisis in the NHS unless you solve the crisis in social care.
So you have to do the two together.
Watch this space, because I think Parliament will be asserting itself on this very important issue.
And we will watch this space. I think health's going to be a big story through into the summer. Now, only a few years ago, it would have been well nigh impossible even to contemplate Britain's main left-of-centre party mired in multiple accusations of anti-Semitism. Yet that is precisely the predicament in which Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party now finds itself. For all of its history, Labour has been the natural home of Jewish workers, intellectuals and aspiring politicians in this country. Yet this week, Jewish groups demonstrated against Labour outside Parliament. It was unprecedented. Every day brings fresh accusations of anti-Semitism at worst, insensitivity to Jewish concerns at best, reaching to the very top of the Labour Party. Even Mr Corbyn himself was criticised for opposing the destruction of a clearly anti-Semitic wall mural in East London a few years back. And in the past 24 hours, one of his leading supporters on the party's ruling council has been forced to resign, a key position for backing an alleged Holocaust denier in the party. She was in charge of the party's efforts to clean up its anti-Semitism. She remains on Labour's ruling council. Mr Corbyn has launched a charm offensive among Jewish groups to reassure them of his good intentions and desire to cleanse Labour of its virus. But so far, they found it more offensive than charming. So what is going on? He is leading Labour peer, scientist and Jew Robert Winston with his take of the week.
Both Britain and the Labour Party have a long history of religious tolerance, and that's one of the reasons why I joined the Labour Party so many years ago. I'm proud to be British, it's central to my being, but I'm also a Zionist. My family left Spain in 1500 because of serious persecution and settled in the north of Israel and lived there perfectly happily with their neighbours for hundreds of years. But now, anti-Semitism has infected the Labour Party, so it's become endemic. I'm deeply ashamed of my party. And whether he likes it or not, Jeremy Corbyn has a lot to answer for. He has encouraged anti-Semites and he's endorsed them. In the modern world, using social media, their conspiracy theories about Jews and statements about hate spread like a disease. And this virus is affecting the Labour Party. The way he dealt with that mural in Tower Hamlets was typical. He failed to condemn those activists or MPs, people who made lying statements that were anti-Semitic. And instead of suspension, why wasn't Ken Livingstone permanently expelled from the Labour Party when he made his comment about Hitler being a Zionist? And the Bradford MP Naz Shah, who was temporarily suspended after her posts had said that Jews were rallying and moving Israel to the USA. I wrote to Jeremy Corbyn about anti-Semitism, but he didn't reply. Much more important, why doesn't he meet and sit down with the Jewish community leaders who are feeling really anxious and very threatened? I want to see Palestinians fully respected and living peacefully with Israelis. But Jeremy Corbyn doesn't seem to understand that his attitude actually decreases the chance of peace and raises the risk of violence. Our leader, who I have no doubt at all is a good person, stands by while Labour descends a disastrous path. He could make our great party unelectable.
And Robert Winston is with us now, as is Aaron Bastani, a Jeremy Corbyn supporter and co-founder of Navarro Media. Welcome to you both. Aaron Bastani, why, in the words of Robert Winston, is anti-Semitism endemic now in the Labour Party?
I think there's a few explanations. One is the party's membership's tripled in the last few years, so obviously there's been a mass increase in people that could potentially be persuaded by these ideas. I agree with what you're saying about digital culture. I think the internet has a huge role to play. I think if you look at that mural, there wasn't just the anti-Semitic trope of these 6 elderly men playing Monopoly. There was, Masonic symbolism. There was somebody holding a placard saying New World Order. And this was like a melange of online conspiracy theories. And for me, it had always been a constant background noise. I hadn't really taken it very seriously until maybe the Trump election. And with Labour, I knew it was there online. Personally, in my CLP, it'd always been very cordial, so there was a distance there. But when I saw the Corbyn response to this mural, which instantly struck me as anti-Semitic, there was something of a realisation personally where I thought, wow, this really is unacceptable. So yeah, I'd offer a structural sort of analysis, I suppose. A sort of digital culture has leaked into what's a mass membership party to an extent.
Do you trust Robert Winston? Do you trust Jeremy Corbyn to root it out?
Look, I've no doubt that Jeremy Corbyn is not an anti-Semite. I think he's a good man. I don't have any problem with that. But I'm very worried about the quality of the leadership, because I think that actually this does need very, very firm leadership, which is not yet shown in this respect.
Well, why not? It's 2 years since Shami Chakrabarty's report on anti-Semitism.
I agree.
I'm told she was in tears in the shadow cabinet at the lack of progress that had been made.
Well, I was at the Labour Party meeting in the House of Lords on Wednesday evening when Jeremy came and talked to us, and I felt that he was almost looking sheepish. I mean, he didn't, he found it very difficult to articulate the words that were needed.
Does he get it?
And I don't know if he gets it or not, but he never for a moment said, I realise I've got to meet the Jewish leaders, I've really got to see Jews who are anxious and feeling threatened. I mean, it's ridiculous to have guards outside Jewish schools, for example. I mean, that's outside a synagogue. It's just not acceptable.
No, but that happens in France too.
It does happen in France.
And Jewish schools in Berlin as well. So it's not unique to Britain. Yeah. Do you trust Jeremy Corbyn to root out the anti-Semites in his party?
Well, action will speak louder than words. We have got to deal with those outstanding cases that have been far too long in being acted upon. We need to see the Chakrabarty report implemented in full.
But my question was, do you trust him to do all that?
Well, I will when I see that action being taken. He said he will have zero tolerance of anti-Semitism.
But we learned tonight 6 Labour councillors who were suspended for anti-Semitism, and I've seen some of the things that they were accused of, and they are classic anti-Semitism, the blood libel, Israel was behind 9/11, all the usual stuff that you see. They've all been reinstated into the party.
Well, I think that is completely unacceptable. And the real problem here is about recognising and understanding left-wing anti-Semitism. And that's where opposition to the actions of the Israeli government tips over into opposition to the state of Israel and a failure to understand why its creation was so important after the Holocaust, and where opposition to capitalism's exploitation of the poor is entwined with age-old anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about rich Jewish bankers controlling the world. Unless you recognise that, understand it and show you're taking action on it by expelling anti-Semites from the party, then people won't trust us that we have zero tolerance.
When I was at school and university, and it may have been the same for you, Michael, the anti-Semitism then was pretty much the preserve of the knuckle-dragging right in British politics. Are you surprised that it now seems to be so prevalent on the hard left?
I am surprised, although I think what Liz has said about its origins are exactly right. I think what Aaron said earlier is exactly right. I've had my own particular shock this evening because I thought Aaron had come on here to kind of take a different point of view from Robert. But when your opening question was, why is it endemic in the Labour, why is anti-Semitism endemic in the Labour Party? The response was not from Aaron, it isn't, but rather an explanation about how the digital world had changed the Labour Party. So actually that has left me in a state of shock because, you know, I hope that someone this evening was perhaps going to argue that this was exaggerated and that there was more hope than appears
But you
to be
don't
the
think
case.
it's been exaggerated then?
I think there's been an issue where the claim is that it's been weaponised by certain parts of the Labour Party. But for me, that's immaterial because it's so important. It's clearly so widespread that that shouldn't matter. And then you now see people saying, well, actually, it's worse than the Tory party, or it's worse than UKIP. And you think, well, fine, but Labour's meant to stand for some things that...
But how do we... this is a matter of faith in this, of trusting the Labour leadership to do something about it. So why is Ken Livingstone still not being expelled?
I think my personal view is Jeremy Corbyn believes in due process, equality under the law. He doesn't want to get involved.
Years.
I agree.
2 years, yeah.
I mean, you can search
Way
my
too
tweets. I said he should be expelled, you know, the day he was
What
suspended.
about the woman in the NEC? She chaired the anti-dispute. She chaired the committee that was meant to root out the anti-Semitism. She's been hearing the cases.
You know,
she backs this Labour activist who tweeted a Holocaust denial or a social media Holocaust denial trope. She has to step down being chair. She's still on the Labour Party's ruling council. Why?
As I understand it, she's been asked to resign.
Oh, from the chair, not from the NEC.
I think
I think she's still a member.
she's still a member of the NEC, but she's not the chair.
She's still on
But she's
the
still on
NEC.
the party's ruling
And she
council.
shouldn't be.
If I came to you tonight and said, I have discovered on the ruling council of the Conservative Party someone who's actually a secret member of the BNP, you would want them, you would demand that the Tories...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
so why are these people still so active in your party?
well, like I say, I think the explanation, the generous explanation, and I do that with Jeremy Corbyn because, for me, in my view, there's a history there where he signed early day motions supporting the Jewish community. He's been an anti-racist. I would say he's been overly kind. He says, well, we need due process, we need equality under the law for every member, hence his position on Ken Livingstone. I don't agree with it because he's the leader of the party. That's a decision I think he's going to have to arrive at. Well, actually, I need to set the agenda on this, which he's reticent to
I need
do.
to bring Robert back. He's
What
not
is the
dealing...
explanation about the mural, though? I just want to...
No, hold on. I need to bring Robert back. He's not dealing quickly enough with the anti-Semites because he's overly kind. What do you say to that?
I mean, what was said this week is enough, and basically, of course, we've had words, we need action, and that is a big issue.
Well, where
And,
is the evidence you're getting the action, though?
Well, I don't think there is any. That's the problem. I mean, what I saw this week was somebody who was not actually recommending certain things he was now intending to do because this is a shocking situation. And I think what really worries me, too, is that I'm already hearing this from some people, that this is seen as a Jewish conspiracy to unseat him.
Yes, that's exactly right, Robert.
you know,
that is one of the worst things.
You know,
we have to call out any
that's
suggestion
that's what I've been told, Andrew.
that people are weaponising this, using it to create mood music or for some underhand issues. It's not. It's because we are ashamed at anti-Semitism in our party. We want
Material for me,
action
yeah.
I
to
don't want
stamp
to be
it out.
discordant, but just for a moment, so I understand it. This idea that Jeremy is an anti-racist and very kind, and you know, just kind of too kind. What is the explanation for the mural? What is the explanation for the fact that he opposed the removal
The
of the mural?
whitewashing of the mural.
Do you know, I can't interpret his decision at all. He says he didn't look at it properly. But, you know...
Well, if that's an excuse for Jeremy, then presumably it's an excuse for
but
this
the
woman
protest
tonight
vote-
that she didn't
Well, but that is
bother
the
to,
excuse.
bother to
No,
look
but
at
excuse
the...
me, that is the
the people in the
excuse
East End had already
Yes, but she's
protested.
been
but
fired. What?
But, no, but she hasn't been fired.
Dropped.
She's been asked to step down from the committee
Chairmanship.
leading the anti-Semitism investigation. She's still on the ruling party's top committee. Mr. Corbyn said he didn't look closely enough at the mural, but he still defended it and sided with the artist who didn't want it to be taken down. The head of the disputes committee, investigation committee in the NEC, says that she didn't see the full context, though she had said earlier that the guy should be reinstated because he had been taken out of context. I mean, should they all have gone to Specsavers?
I think...
But he'd posted Sorry.
No, go on.
No, I was asking
I was
her.
just gonna say-
Andrew's
I was just going to say he
Just let her off the
posted
hook.
2 clearly anti-Semitic remarks afterwards, so they were in the public domain. So he was on record as making anti-Semitic comments in respect
The
of that
artist
mural.
had said, Jews don't like me portraying the Rothschilds and Warburgs as the demons they are. Well, if that's not anti-Semitic, what is?
I think it is anti-Semitic.
You see, here's what, if you're looking at this from the outside and you see the lack of action being taken and the clear evidence, which interesting that you're not disputing at all, of the widespread, but we're expecting a leader of a party to do something about this who's taken tea with Raed Salah, who's an Islamist hate preacher and who said that the Jews were warned before the attack on the Twin Towers to get out. A leader who has met with Hamas and Hezbollah, called them his friends, who appears on Press TV, a channel of Holocaust deniers, who defended Stephen Sizer, who blamed Israel for 9/11, who was on 5 anti-Semitic Facebooks and who defended the anti-Semitic mural in the East End of London. So if you're not a Corbyn supporter, you wouldn't really trust them to root this out, would you?
Can I make a few points? So the first is, those are claims which are visibly, OK, this fits in with the broader picture of this gentleman doesn't want to deal with anti-Semitism. What I find particularly interesting about the mural is, I would submit, it's my belief, that most Brits would look at that mural and say, well, what's anti-Semitic about it? And this is where we have a problem. This is where we have a problem, because it is anti-Semitic. And within the Labour Party, more broadly, there's an issue of political education. We've had this huge flood of people into the party.
Well, that's the point you began the programme with. But that means you then have to deal with it.
Well, this is what. I just want to say one. I'll just finish one thing.
Of course.
Yeah. The thing is, the left was dead in this country until 2015, and it's now become this big focus point. It had no institutions. It wasn't embedded in communities. The workers' movement of the early 19th century was based on self-improvement, temperance movement.
What's this got to do with denying the Holocaust?
Self-education. These things don't exist anymore. We don't have institutions where people are offered better explanations for things not working in their life. That's a failure of the left. But the point is, Labour now has, potentially, a government in waiting. It now has this mass membership, and that political education is lacking. And that is part of the solution. Let's talk about the solutions. Yes, we need to chuck people out. We need to roll out education about what
that's interesting.
anti-Semitism is.
Robert Winston, if the leader of the Labour Party does not grasp this issue, which you say is endemic, is he fit to be Prime Minister?
I fear that he's not, unfortunately. And that troubles me to say that on
Where
air
does that leave
publicly.
you as a member of the Labour Party?
Well, I shan't leave the Labour Party. I'm a member of the Labour Party, and unless they forced me out, I would not leave. I've been sitting on the Labour benches for a long time in the House of Lords, admittedly a very privileged position, and I'm surrounded by people who I respect and work with and who have similar ideals and views.
If this is allowed to fester in your party, is Mr Corbyn fit to be Prime Minister?
He can't allow it to fester, Andrew, and there are many MPs and Labour Party members who want and demand action. I hope that comes
But what are
swiftly.
you going to do about it?
Well, just tonight, many of us have said that we believe that Christine Shawcroft shouldn't be on our NEC, that I understand she might step down in June when the next elections are happening, but I think that should happen more swiftly. We want to see those cases dealt with.
Right.
We want it to be called out, the abuse of people who
we
have
know that,
campaigned
but if
against
that doesn't
anti-Semitism.
happen, and people are reinstated. I mean, the mayor of
it has to
one of the
happen,
Labour mayors
Andrew, and that's
was
why we're-
suspended, and he was allowed back in again. Mr Livingston has still suspended, not expelled. So what I'm saying is, if this is allowed to fester,
Well,
is your leader fit to be Prime Minister?
We are determined to make sure that it doesn't, Andrew. We are determined
happens if it
to
does?
make sure. Well, I think that there will be such a pressure from Labour MPs, Labour members and the Jewish community that action will be taken, and that's absolutely right. But we have to keep up the pressure on that and make it clear that people who are standing up about this are not somehow weaponising it, that this is about our belief in the values of the Labour Party and the abuse and harassment that people get who went to that demonstration, calls for them to be deselected, must be called out as totally wrong.
We're going to have to leave it. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to leave it there. Sorry, Michael. Mr Bastani, Lord Winston, thank you very much for being with us. Now, it's late. Guillaume Ray late He's the French waiter sacked for rudeness, who claimed wrongful dismissal on the grounds that he wasn't rude, just French. I can see the queue of ambulance chasing lawyers as I speak, lining up to defend their clients on the basis of national stereotypes, however inaccurate. Someone who's neither rude nor French is actor and comedian Tiff Stevenson. She's going to be putting cheating in the spotlight. And if you're still determined to whitter on the Twitter and give away all your secrets on the Mark Fleeceberg, then think again. I've borrowed the Davis Davis sick bucket from Andrew Marr's studio, and I'm prepared to use it. We live in a topsy-turvy world, and politicians are heading for their Easter break to a backdrop few would have predicted only a few weeks ago. With the Maybot in better fettle than at any time since a disastrous election campaign last year, and Dear Jezza on the defensive more than at any time since he became Labour leader. Of course, such is the febrile state of politics these days that the roles could easily be reversed by the time they all return to Westminster. Let's not forget the Maybot is often a walking holiday in Wales. And we know what happened last time she tried that. Yes, these are unpredictable times, especially with the Brexit clock now ticking like that infernal digital clock in 24, but with no Jack Bauer in sight to save the day. No wonder we're all so stressed, including Claire Cohn of The Telegraph, which is why she's bringing this week's roundup from a relaxing tub.
Andrew Neil caught ball tampering.
Bad news.
Michael Portillo out with a leg injury.
More bad news.
Liz Kendall, a double agent for Newsnight.
Oh, this is all so gloomy. I'm going to cheer myself up with a nice hot bath.
Research has shown that unwashed rubber bath toys could be making you ill.
What's that? Even my bath toys are going to make me ill. Oh well, in for a penny, in for a pound. With a year to go until the big day, Brexiteers and Remoaners alike were getting their rubber ducks in a row.
The closest they've come to a trade deal is the checkout at Waitrose.
Lord Patten there, auditioning to be one of Pulp's common people. Now then, what to wear to protect me from all of those germy bath toys? One of Michael's shirts? No. Oh, one of Liz's little black dresses? No. Ah, this'll do. Not to be deterred from such slights by Patten, Jacob Rees-Mogg criticised those floating the idea of a second referendum.
It has taken us some time to rediscover the opportunities of a truly global Britain, and a few cave dwellers still want to stop the process. But with 367 days to go, the United Kingdom will be free.
Ow! Oh! Ooh. Oh, it's enough to make you sick, really. Maybe that's what got to Brexit Secretary David Davis at the weekend.
It's been hard pounding and late nights for David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, who I should say has struggled here despite feeling most unwell this morning. So thank you very much indeed for that.
Well, if the camera suddenly switches to you, your
we'll know
audience will know what's happened.
Right.
Oh, I'm starting to itch already. But at least he said the water was more than lukewarm on Britain's chances of securing a deal with the EU.
One of the stories of the last 3-4 months has been that the future deal, the future economic partnership and the future security and foreign and defence partnership are now looking incredibly probable, very, very highly probable, which perhaps some weren't saying before Christmas.
Theresa May will certainly need a long hot soak at the end of today after her big Brexit bonanza tour of the UK.
I think there are real opportunities for the United Kingdom. I think there's a bright future out there. And yes, I think Brexit is going to deliver a country. It will be different, but I think there are real opportunities for us as an independent nation for the future.
Gonna wash that man right out of my hair. I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair. I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair and send him on his way.
With relations ever frostier with Russia, another recession looming and calls for a second referendum on EU membership, Jeremy Corbyn had a veritable bath bomb of topics to lead on at PMQs. But the leader of the opposition knows that he has a few scaly patches of skin to scratch off his own party on those issues first.
Mental health affects us all, and it's welcome that there is now much less stigma surrounding mental health. However, our NHS is in crisis. The crisis is particularly acute in mental health services.
Oh, caught me doing my Jeremy Corbyn impression there. And there he was, leading on just about the only safe issue for Labour at the moment.
The National Health Service is receiving extra funding from this government, extra funding for mental health and extra funding for other services.
But even given the traditional Labour territory and the need to shave off a few tens of billions from the UK's deficit, Mr Gove, I'm not sure this razor is as environmentally sustainable as yours. The PM was unafraid to splash around promises of a longer-term funding settlement for the NHS at the Liaison Committee this week.
For the NHS to plan and manage effectively, we need to get away from those annual top-ups of the budget that we've seen, and we do need to have a sustainable long-term plan.
Parole Board Chairman Nick Hardwick's reputation was sunk after the decision to release rapist John Worboys was overturned by the High Court. The Justice Secretary made a statement to the Commons amid calls for his own resignation.
Given the very serious issues identified in this case, I can announce today that I intend to conduct further work to examine the Parole Board rules in their entirety.
Boris Johnson needed toweling down after his robust response to Russia over the Salisbury nerve agent attack.
After all the outrage and the provocation that we have had from Russia, the countries of the world have come together in numbers far greater than Putin can possibly have imagined, and they are saying enough is enough.
But the EU and its member states offered Britain a security blanket of support in standing up to the Kremlin.
As a direct follow-up to last week's European Council decision to react to Russia within a common framework, already today 14 member states have decided to expel Russian diplomats.
Well, may as well relax while I still can. Who knows what the next perturbing news splash might be.
Evening all, welcome to this. And our thanks to the Corinthia Hotel in Westminster for letting Claire soak her troubles away. Liz, is it now inevitable that we will leave the EU, or could Remainers still in some way stop it?
Well, the parliamentary vote that we have been promised in the autumn, I think, is the key point. And it seems to me, with a year to go, the government still hasn't really faced up to the big choice about whether we're going to agree to stick with EU rules and keep trade as frictionless as possible. Yeah. Or if we're going to have a clean break and completely diverge. And my big worry is none of that will be agreed by the time we have the vote in the Commons. They want to push that way down the line. They want to keep that as opaque as possible. And the real worry for me and for many people in Parliament is that it can't be a meaningful vote unless we're clear on that. Because once we're out, we won't know what the deal is we're asking people to actually agree. And that's the real problem.
But when I interviewed David Davis last night, he made it clear that if a deal is done and then presented to Parliament, if MPs vote for the deal, we leave on that deal. If they vote against the deal, we leave with no deal. Either way, we leave. How is that a meaningful vote?
It's not.
That is one scenario, and another scenario is that the vote is held at the time before there's any deal at all, because at least one possibility is that we'll go into the transition period without knowing what the deal is.
I think that's highly likely.
Well, Mr. Davis says that won't be the case, that although not every I will be dotted or every T, he said that more than heads of agreement will be decided by the end of October.
Well, supposing there were a deal and supposing Parliament voted against the deal, it is very difficult to know what that means. I mean, because the government will have negotiated with the European Union that which is possible.
And I think that's why we have to make sure the government is clear about the choice, because at the moment that they haven't decided. You know, it's not going to be clear through the transition or implementation deal, and asking people to vote for something when we still don't know what the final result will be is not a meaningful vote. And I think that will be the key priority for people in Parliament over the next 6 months.
Have the Brexiteers, of which you are one, lost all ability to articulate a post-Brexit vision for this country?
No, I wouldn't say that. And in
so
fact,
who's done it?
Well, I think Theresa May did it in the interview of which you showed a clip a moment ago.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a vision?
Yes. She talked about taking back the ability to make her own laws, not having to make contributions to the European Union, making her own trade deals.
But what does global Britain mean, and how have we not been global?
Well, one example would be we're in a customs union which throws up tariff barriers against the rest of the world. I mean, it's very surprising that left-wing parties could be in favour of that. Why do you want to block out the rest of the world? Why do you want cosy, highly developed, rich countries to sit behind a tariff barrier?
But being in the EU customs union doesn't stop us trading with China. The issues with trading...
It hasn't stopped Germany.
And it hasn't stopped Germany, exactly.
No, well, it stops two things. First of all, it stops us trading without tariffs. And secondly, it stops us making our own trade deal. We have to wait for all the European Union.
You know the
to do
reason why it's hard for many people to trade with China is because they won't open up some of their markets to us, because it's difficult to understand the culture. I mean, this myth that somehow the EU is stopping us from being a global
let's
country.
Not litigate the referendum again.
No, indeed.
All this talk of more money for the NHS. Are the Tories spending the Brexit dividend before Brexit?
Well, the economic circumstances are a little bit better than they were 6 months ago. And in these circumstances, the government is, showing a bit of petticoat, isn't it? Not only on the NHS, but also on defence.
Can I say one thing on the... and I said earlier, you can't solve the NHS problem without solving the social care problem. That is going to require difficult decisions about, I believe, asking for more money to be spent by wealthier people and by wealthier older people in particular. But one of the things that really strikes me is that actually each of the last 4 Prime Ministers have got into Downing Street without really understanding the NHS, the challenges it faces, and in particular the links with social care. As I said, it's welcome that we might get more money.
Both the Labour and the Tory front benches seem...
Well, I do think here we have really, I have to say here, we have really pushed the Prime Minister into this position. But we need a 10-year strategy for investment and reform. And at the moment, I don't see Theresa May grasping that. She's come very late to the table.
Given your own analysis, with which I don't disagree, I think you're being very unfair to Theresa May. One of the reasons she did so disastrously at the last election was that she made this extraordinary promise that people who had means were going to be reduced to their last £100,000. They would have to sell everything, including their homes, to pay for their social care. She was absolutely addressing the problem and she got hammered in the election.
That's partly because, or not partly, almost entirely because she hadn't prepared the ground. She just sprung it on everybody and people didn't understand it. It was easy to misrepresent and people don't like surprises in an election campaign.
Even if you represented it, people didn't like it.
I mean, the Cabinet hadn't even been told about it. They were fighting the election.
All those things are true, but she did actually propose something.
Just a final thing. The way Britain's allies have rallied round the country in the wake of the Salisbury attacks has been remarkable. Remarkable. Boris Johnson's the Foreign Secretary. Does he deserve the credit?
I've been thinking about that. I think the Foreign Office certainly does. I'm very critical of the Foreign Office. You know, they're hopeless Remainers and so on. But I think they're probably still quite good at that diplomacy, still quite good in every embassy in the world, going around and getting the allies on board.
It's very interesting that no Conservative has praised Boris Johnson in this regard.
And I don't want to break that record.
No, so it's the Foreign Office, the institution, not the man.
I believe so.
I thought we might get a scoop there and he would say something nice about Mr Johnson, but...
Thankfully not.
Even in Easter, you can't get it. Now, the news stunned the nation. Its leader was shocked. The people were incredulous. The truth unbearable. No, not the Salisbury nerve agent attack or the latest emanation from the White House. Something much more important. Cricket. And the Aussie ball tampering scandal. For Aussie sports fans, in other words, the whole nation, this was a national humiliation, a near-death experience. Why? What is it about a leather ball and a bit of sandpaper that can provoke a national crisis? We don't know. So that's why we're putting Playing by the Rules in tonight's Spotlight. It seems cheating abounds this week. We've got used to seeing politicians and sportsmen bend the rules a bit. Now and then, of course. But as a few notable individuals have been finding out, a rule will only bend so far. Caught on live television using sandpaper to improve their chances, the Australian cricket team took rather childish steps to hide the evidence.
I'm not proud of what's happened. You know, it's not within the spirit of the game, my integrity, the team's integrity.
Nobody could accuse politics of being a gentleman's game, of course. The Speaker of the House took some time this week to remind Boris that there are some limits.
There's a noble and learned lady, the Baroness, whatever it is, I can't remember what it is. Newgee.
The Shadow Foreign Secretary has a name, and it's not Lady something. We know what her name is, and it is inappropriate and frankly sexist to speak in those terms.
Revelations that Facebook data was used to fine-tune the Leave campaign have led some figures to suggest that the Brexit vote wasn't exactly playing fair.
This is a breach of the law. This is cheating.
Perhaps the problem is that nobody really knows what the rules are anymore. The president of Estonia fondly recalled the good old days, the Cold War days, when a spy would really know what was what.
Previously, during the Cold War period, both sides knew the rules. I mean, what are then the rules right now, thinking of Salisbury?
From one clandestine network to another, the mafia bore the brunt of the Pope's wrath this week, as he reminded them that even if they outsmart the law, a higher power really sets the rules of the game.
They have nothing in them that is Christian. They call themselves Christian, but they carry death in their souls and inflict it on others.
Actor Tiff Stevenson thinks some rules are there to be broken, some to be obeyed. But can you really get away with breaking any of them? And I'm delighted to welcome Tiff with us now. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Being in this ungodly hour. Are you a rule breaker?
Have I cheated? Have I broken? I think the only test I've ever cheated on is a pregnancy one. I don't know who the winner is there. I'm
trying to work out how you cheated.
I think, well, the Australian cricket team, the interesting thing about this was when they came out and said, look, we only cheated because we thought we'd win, as if everyone would go, oh, well, fine. Yeah. Oh, it's fine if you're doing it to win. So, yeah, I think, you know, in some cases in sports, we shouldn't cheat, and it's not OK, like Lance Armstrong, to say, well, my cheating wasn't as bad because everyone else was cheating. You know, and when there's money and bets being placed, and within the world of politics, I don't think the rules should be broken. But I think within the world of art, my world, of course, I think this way, I think sometimes some rules are meant to be bent and broken, and disruptors are good for art, for music, for theatre, for stand-up.
Because that can take things on.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas when... and people are looking for you to do something like that. But, I mean, the Australians in particular, cricket is the national sport. Cricket is synonymous with fair play more than any other sport. It's the sport of fair play. I mean, when I was played cricket at school, you were meant to, if you felt you were out, say the ball got an edge and the wicketkeeper caught it, even if the umpire didn't get you out, if you felt the ball had hit the bat, you were meant to walk. And that's why it's been such an important, I think, for the national psyche in Australia.
To walk or not walk?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's supposed to be on you, is it, as the player?
Yeah.
To be responsible for your own...
Even if the umpire doesn't think you were out, if you thought you were, you should do it. And I think for Australia, that's why it's been so big. But I think it was the Estonian Prime Minister made an interesting point in this day and age. We don't quite know what the rules are anymore in so many things. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I think so. And I think culturally there's differences as well. I've just been in America for all of January in Los Angeles, and no one ever really says yes or no. I've noticed that. You don't get firm answers, and I don't know whether this is just that's part of their identity, you know, or it could just be me. Maybe no one wanted to yes or no me. But I tend to find that when I'm in America, people talk around things and sort of in euphemisms and talk around things, whereas actually I think in the UK we're a bit more plain speaking, we're a bit more blunt. And I
And you think it's because they're not quite sure what the expected answer is?
Yeah, maybe it's because it's so litigious. No one wants to say something that will be brought back to them later on. Like, you know, when a lot of the stuff came out around Me Too, there were people that couldn't apologise or seemed to be unable to do a simple apology in the most... And it's really difficult to say sorry, but in a real plain-speaking way to say, I'm sorry I did that to you. It was all sort of couched in, I'm sorry you feel that way, and I didn't mean to hurt anyone, I didn't mean to offend anyone. And maybe it's because if there's an admission of guilt there, that maybe people talk around things a little bit more. Maybe we're not as litigious here, I don't know.
It dilutes the apology when they do that, though,
yes, it does, and it makes it a non-apology, whereas actually what you...
And even more irritating.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Liz looks a bit irritated. Are you a rule breaker, Michael?
To some extent, but I think what's happening in cricket is not what you describe. I mean, I think for a long time cricket has been moving away from being strictly adherent to the rules.
I think that's probably true.
And what happens in these situations is people are going beyond the rules and then suddenly somebody gets caught and the whole edifice comes down. I've always thought that a great advantage we have in Britain, we often chastise ourselves because, you know, we stick by the rules and our European partners don't. I've always thought it was a terrific advantage that we stuck by the rules, because as soon as you have a penumbra of moving outside the rules, you just don't know where you are. You just don't know what you're allowed to do.
Penumbra, there you go. Liz, when did you last break a rule?
Not one that I'd say on national TV.
Then we better leave it there.
Yeah, fine.
Do you have anything to say on the penumbra either? Would you like to add to that, or should we just leave it hanging
but maybe we
in
could
there?
discuss it a bit later.
You don't get
We've
words
worn
like
black in the death of fairness.
You don't get words like that on the One Show, do you?
The penumbra, I don't even know what it is.
Before you go, tell us, what are you up to?
Oh, I'm on tour at the moment with my show Bombshell.
Bombshell.
Yes.
Lovely
in all major
title.
cities.
Yes.
And all the best venues.
All the best venues, Leeds City Variety, Soho Theatre, Bristol Wardrobe, Sudbury Quays. Yeah, just tonight, came off stage, came here.
But we're glad you did, and good luck with the rest of the tour.
Place.
Thank you
for
so
being
much.
with us. Thanks,
guys.
Now, that's your lot for tonight, folks, but not for us, because we're off to Lulu's, where tampering with balls has been rife for years. And we think it's time to stop the fiddling. Michael objected, but Liz and I put him back in his box. His cricket box. It's for its own safety. Nighty-night, don't let Kim Jong-un's new programme called Great Continental Railway Journeys bite. Michael, try not to have an occlusion.
경의하는 최고령도 동도동지 일행이 따뜻한 인사를 나누셨습니다. 솔준 여사께 여성들이 향기그윽한 꽃다발을 삼가 드렸습니다. 경의하는 최고령도자 동지께서 중화인민공화국의 국경도시 단동에 도착하시자 중국共産党중앙위원회 대외연락부장 성도 동지는 석군평열이 환영한다고 말했습니다.